Welcome to this first short referencing video for module E102. And in this one, we're just going to look at all the things involved in referencing a chapter in the module text. Before we do that, let me just remind you of this basic principle. If it takes effort to find something out, then you need to reference it. Now, by that I mean that you must acknowledge all your sources throughout your TMAs. And the general rule is that if you had to refer to the module text or to an online activity to write a part of the TMA, or if you based it on the notes you made from these whilst you're working through them each week, then you need to include a reference to the relevant chapter or the activity. The assessment guide says this: there are two stages at which you need to let your reader know where you source the material in your assignment. The in-text references, which are in the body of your assignment. These are the ones that you put in as you're writing your essay. And then the second one is the references list that comes right at the end of the assignment. Now, within the main text of your assignment, a reference shows the source of your information in the briefest way. Usually this just involves giving the author's name and the year of publication. For example, Montgomery 2014, if we're referring to the first chapter in the module text. So let's take this chapter as an example. Here's a paraphrase of some material that you'll find on page 4 of that chapter. There are many different influences on childhood, including social, economical, and political factors. This means that childhood itself will differ depending on its historical and social context. Now, I've written that in my own words, but the material itself is taken from page 4 of chapter 1, so I need to reference it to show that I've paraphrased from here. Remember, in the text you need the briefest information possible. So, here's two ways of referencing this paragraph. In the first one, Montgomery's name and the publication date just come in brackets at the end. In other words, I write the paraphrase and then I acknowledge that it's drawn from Montgomery's work. In option 2, I introduce Montgomery into the sentence itself. So I say that Montgomery suggests that there are. And in that case, I just pop the publication date in brackets directly after Montgomery's name. Note that because these are paraphrases, you don't need to give a page reference. If you were directly quoting Montgomery word for word, you'd need to add a page reference after Montgomery 2014. Note that nowhere do I say in chapter 1 of the book, and nor do I include Montgomery's first name. And these are two common errors. You don't need them. It's just the surname and the publication date. And by the way, my book is published in 2014. You might have a later edition, so you need to check to make sure that you get that date right. What this means is that now, as the reader, I have enough information to find full details of this chapter in the reference list at the end. Now, in that reference list, here is the format for the reference for Montgomery's chapter. And let me just take you through that. So you'll see the first thing we have is Montgomery's name. So this is the chapter author's name. And first of all, we get her surname, and then we get a comma, her initial, and a full stop. And that's the same throughout your reference list. Surname first, comma, initial, full stop. And you'll organise your references in alphabetical order depending on that surname. So a surname of an author that begins with a letter that comes before M in the alphabet would go before this Montgomery reference, and obviously one with a letter coming later in the alphabet would go after this Montgomery reference in your reference list. Next up is the publication date of the book. And you can see now that I've got the surname and the publication date, which references me back to the reference in the text that we've just looked at. Next up, we have the title of the chapter. And the thing to notice here is that it's got an inverted comma at the beginning and the end, and it's not in italics. It's literally just the title of the chapter in single inverted commas, and then followed, as you can see, by a comma after that second inverted comma. So that's the chapter title. Now I need to say that this is actually in a book that's been edited by other people, although obviously in this case one of them is Montgomery herself. And so I say, effectively, this chapter, What is Childhood Studies, is found in Farrington Flint, comma, L, again, surname, initial, and a full stop after the initial, and Montgomery, comma, H, and a full stop. And then in brackets, eds, to show that they're the editors of this book. So again, notice the format. It's the surname first, followed by the initial. Next up, we have the title of the actual book itself. And I've just noticed a slight error here, and Milton Keynes is highlighted. We'll come back to that in a moment. But at the moment, just look at An Introduction to Childhood Studies and Child Psychology. And you'll see that that's the book title, and it appears in italics. Milton Keynes is the name of the place where the book's published. And note there's a comma at the end of the book title, and then Milton Keynes, followed by the name of the publisher, the Open University, and a full stop. And the great thing is, once you've formatted one chapter, you can do them all, because you just need to change the author's name and the title of the chapter. Everything else is the same, because all of your references, your chapter references, come from the same book. So it's easy to do a really nice copy and paste job there. However, at various points in the module text, the chapter author will refer to the work of another theorist. You're not expected to read the original source, so you don't reference that either. Instead, you tell the reader of your essay where you found out about this theorist. In other words, you read about them in the chapter of the module text. Look at this example. You haven't read Pinker's original work for yourself, but it is mentioned in chapter 3 of the module text. So, here, you tell your reader that Pinker's work was published in 2002. See that? Directly after his surname. But then you let me know that you actually read about this in Gurjo's chapter, which was also published in 2014 because it's a chapter from the module text. Then, and where this is where rather students often go wrong, you don't include the Pinker reference in your reference list at the end. You just include the reference for the module text chapter in which you read about him. In other words, you're consistent with what you did for the in-text reference. You tell me the details of where you read about Pinker because you didn't actually read his original work. And again, here's a reference for a module chapter then. So you read about Pinker in Gurjo's chapter, so let's make sure we reference that correctly. As before, we start with the surname and a comma, and then an initial and a full stop. The publication date, same as before, 2014. Here's the chapter title in those inverted commas with a comma afterwards. Here's where we let the reader know that we found this chapter in an edited book and that these are the editors. Here's the book title in not in inverted commas, in italics. And following that, finally, the place of publication and the name of the publisher. And that's how you reference the module text and authors who are cited in the module text. I hope you found that useful.